All right. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to This Week in Tyranny. I am your host, Conrad Rogas. It's Sunday, late afternoon, August 24th, 2025, episode 142 of This Week in Tyranny, the best low budget alternative media production out there. Okay. It looks a little bit different. I can already see it. It's because my light changed. I had like a yellow filter on my light, but now it's only straight bright white coming at me. But who cares? We'll deal with that. Who knows? Maybe it looks better. Uh, the look is not what matters anyway. The content is what matters, right? And the content of this episode is going to be based on the episode of The High Wire that came out recently. The High Wire is a show by Del Bigtree. So we're gonna go secondhand with this show. The High Wire became popular in 2020, but really it started in April of 2017. Um, and as they are self-described, months ahead of mainstream media on COVID, the High Wire brings you verified truth and gives you the sources. So Del is one of these researchers. He does a show about a lot of this alternative media material, but mainly his work is centered in the medical, the vaccines. They do a lot of litigation, a lot of legal action to go get these studies, and he is a play. He's a definite player in this alternative media community. This is going to be from last week's episode 437, titled "Sacred Science." And this section that we're going to cover is from a section of that show called the Jackson Report, and that's where Jeffrey Jackson, investigative journalist, he comes on and he gives a rundown of the topics, kind of like This Week in Tyranny, right? So anyway, the reason we're talking about this is because I had a friend send this show to me, said I should watch it. So okay, why don't I just do a show on it anyway? It had some valuable information. That's not like a backhanded compliment. It's a good show. It's a good show. I'm not gonna pick it apart or anything like that. Usually we use primary sources here, right? I like to talk about whatever happens direct and go get our primary sources, and then I'll give you my thoughts. But here, I'm gonna use Dell's material because I want to respond not only to the topics, which are good, but also respond to their coverage of the topics and just make some points around that. So number one, this section of the Jackson Report, they start talking about free speech. That we have United States politicians sounding the alarm on free speech now. And this is all having to do with the Digital Services Act in the European Union. So over there in Europe, they got the Digital Services Act. The reason it's a story now, it's not new, but the second phase of it is being implemented. And as it is being implemented in Europe, now these USA politicians, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, they're speaking out against it. They're speaking out against that censorship that's going on over there. So Trump, Rubio, Vance, they go out in defense of free speech and speaking out against censorship. So Dell and Jeffrey, they cover this. It's well researched. They're not wrong in how they research it. They're on the right side, right? The obvious side against censorship. It's pretty clear. The DSA, the Digital Services Act, is all hovering around this idea of information resulting in collective harm. That's kind of the leg it stands on. Science and medicine, but also overlapping with that bad influence of TikTok on children. We had that here, right? We had the TikTok ban because resulting that kind of content is resulting in straight up harm, right? Harm and this goes into self harm as well. And a lot of these things, I did another show about just straight up like gore and violence and shock videos being thrown to kids through TikTok and Twitter. So the reason I bring it up is there are a lot of reasons. Those are going to be the reasons when we start engaging in censorship. It's going to be either having to do with the vaccine and then climate change, and then it's going to be this stuff. Well, it's to protect the children. So they're doing that, but the final goal is what they're trying to do over there in Europe is they want to hold businesses financially responsible for controlling content so that the government doesn't have to censor things. It'll get done at every level, because if not, then then they'll get sued. Basically, their money depends on it, so they'd rather like outsource their censorship to the corporations, and that's why it's called the Digital Services Act. It's like at every level of providing digital services, which is even access to internet, a new website, you know, all those people have an outlined responsibility to monitor and curate that information, right? This is how they're doing it. So here's what they don't cover though on Dell's show. This stand that the USA politicians are taking against censorship, it's low-hanging fruit. It's just for show, and it's set up that way. It's set up that way. All this does, Trump coming out and telling everybody how important free speech is, it gets the Europeans even more dug into what they're doing, right? Because if the truth comes from his mouth, well, that hurts the truth, right? It hurts that idea because it's coming from the mouth of somebody who's kind of put his foot in his mouth at every turn, right? He's, you know, especially for people in Europe. If you got Trump and Rubio and Vance telling you one thing, it's pretty safe for them to do the opposite. And it's really as simple as that. Like, forget the principle of free speech here. These people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking they don't want to be like Donald. They don't want to be like Donald. That's the thing. So, you know, I'm definitely not going to wave my fist in there and say, yeah, that's right, we have to stand up for free speech. Look, this is the reason Trump got elected again. He said that the media is fake news, correct, but made that standpoint look bad over time. Right? He's actually kind of like brought the media back because now they're going to stand up to him, and it's going to give him some kind of credibility. You know, this is like when they put a really mean guy, a really nasty wrestler, to make the guy fighting against him more popular. It's just classic. It's just the most basic of professional wrestling psychology. You bring the heel out there, kick the babyface's ass. Nobody was caring about that guy. He already lost his popularity, but now he's having to deal with all of this pressure and injustice, and out of that pressure, it makes a diamond. You make something out of nothing. That's magic, but it's really just psychology. So that's why the guy gets elected again. Then he gets RFK to be in his official administration and then push back on pesticides and food dyes. But that makes that standpoint look bad. This makes everybody that's talking about natural living and health and the dangers of pesticides and medications, we're looking bad. We're looking bad because these politicians are spearheading these movements. They shouldn't be spearheading these movements. They shouldn't be figureheads. It should be, you know, people who are not going to look stupid in front of the camera. But politicians always end up looking stupid because they have to, you know, they're on a sinking ship trying to convince you to come aboard. So America gets presented here as this like Wild West situation, and then the European and Canadian section is concerned with safety over liberty. So you got that battle, that back and forth. Again, it's just creating the necessary friction to keep these things moving. Another part of this, it conceals, this conceals the technocratic censorship style, because it's different strokes for different folks when it comes to tyranny. They're going to point the finger over at Europe and say, look what's happening over there, but is there not censorship over here? Is there still not censorship? You could say it's even worse, because there they actually have a law, right? They actually have an outlined code, and you know who's doing the censorship there. Here, big tech companies, they can do this over there as well, but I'm just saying that, you know, this is look over there, waving your hands, look over there, but any big tech company can control what they show you, and we wouldn't even know. That's the way the algorithms work here. It just happens. It's algorithmic content moderation. And then that old school European Canadian socialist style of censorship, in a way it's not as bad because it's more transparent. At least you could see it. But no one knows if someone is blacklisted or shadow banned. We would never actually know. And this is the Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, and Elon Musk area of interest. They're so interested in information, controlling all of it, and they want to control what information is spit back out to us. And when it comes to tyranny in the world, it is different strokes for different folks, different flavors of censorship. So don't be fooled into thinking that the DSA is it, that's censorship. But it is important, and I also covered it. I found the video. It was actually September 1st, 2023 that I did it. I did it on episode 39. It's almost 2 years ago to the day. I'm surprised by how long ago that was. I didn't think it was that long ago, but here it is. You could watch that episode. I talk about the Digital Services Act in detail. But Jeffrey and Dell, they make a very good link here between what is happening in Europe with censorship, and then they link it to the facial verification that we're seeing more in the United States as well. More and more scanning your IDs, facial verifications to get into apps. That's a very good connection. Truly, that is a common thread. So these companies, in order to comply with the UK laws, they want to implement it across the whole platform, right? So even though it's happening over there, not happening over here, it is happening over here as well. So well done there. Then they transition to, from this story, we're going to go on to the next story. Again, well done the way they did transition it. There are these droughts in the UK. So now we transition to talking about the environmental, climate change, zero carbon agenda. And what links that to censorship is the concept of collective risk. That's the same basis. They're going to say it's because of collective risks that we need to control speech, and because of collective risk, we need to control human behavior because the whole planet is at risk. It's like we're all in this together, and we all answer to each other, so we have to sacrifice for each other, because if not, then all of us are going away. That's the idea. And that idea is actually based on a universal truth. It's based on something that is true. In a family or an army, one of the members at some point is going to have to make a compromise sometimes. They're going to have to sacrifice for the group. If not, then all of the members would suffer. But this is really, this happens in a family or in like a military unit. This is based on the right idea, but it's applied in a wrong way, because there can be no unit of governance above the nuclear family. The family is the highest unit of government that there could be. For adults, there is no governance beyond the individual, right? Just because if I'm an adult and someone in my family tells me to do something, they can't tell me to do that. But with kids, obviously, their parents have more of a say, especially when you're talking about a baby that cannot make all of these decisions, and they cannot enforce their rights. They cannot assert their claims of property, right? They depend on the parents, especially the mom, to do that. So in a family, that there is a unit of governance, so to speak, that's beyond the individual. But that's the thing. For a newborn baby, the mom is responsible for securing all his rights and freedoms. And then as the child grows up, then those decisions are made by a committee of mom, dad, and child. And that's the answer to the hypothetical, because you get the hypothetical, oh, so you say that every person, this is the, when you try to argue for anarchy, for natural law, right? They say, oh, so you're saying that every person can decide, can do whatever they want. So what if a baby runs out into the street? No one's allowed to stop them. No one's allowed to grab them, because that's the decision he made, as long as he's not harming somebody else. So and that's not what I'm saying, right? And that's why I just explained it. There is a nuanced area when it comes to the family. That's why family is so important. That's why it's so difficult to solve this, because where it all went wrong in the world is in the childhood and in the adolescence, right? Being taught morality and taught these principles. But back to the topic now. All systems of tyranny, they're based on the idea of treating the entire world like a controlling family, in which the government is the parent. That's the point. That's why it does all go back to the family. Collective risk, collective harm, collective good. That's what all of that is. It's trying to make it seem like we're all in this together, because that is the only way you can justify controlling someone and forcing them to do something. You cannot justify it unless you bring in the familial idea of collective risk. Now, specifically concerning droughts, Jackson and Dell, they point out the official guidelines for preventing, for preventing droughts and preserving water. They're going to say turn off the tap, don't water your lawn, and they also said turn off your computers, turn off all devices. Why? Because data centers use water for cooling. So that surprised me to hear that these are the new guidelines. I remember when I was back in grade school, it was a very innocent, just take shorter showers. Don't take 30-minute showers. Take a 15-minute shower, and that's as far as it went. And now, flow restrictors on all home faucets and shower heads. That's standard industry practice, right? So now it goes beyond just now watering your plants. It goes to turning off devices, and that is invasive control. And it exactly follows the pattern of an abusive, sadistic parent caretaker who punishes children and goes further and further into controlling every single aspect of their life. And those stories, what I'm describing, what happens in these abusive homes, those stories are all over YouTube. You can look it up. We talked about a Ruby Frankie story with Jody Hildebrand, and that's one of millions. They're all over. It's an exact reflection of this same pattern that this sustainability agenda is following. More and more control over what you're allowed to do, all based on this idea of collective risk. And it makes sense. It's all about a certain them having full power to live out their sadistic fantasy. And that can be done on a world scale if you only get people to think of the world as one family, one abusive family. That's what's going on. So that's our story about that. Next is the wildfires in Canada, okay? So staying on the environment. In Nova Scotia, Canada, there's an official ban on walking in the woods. People are banned from going into the woods for the entire province. So this is, an entire province of Canada. You cannot walk into the woods. The premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, they call him a premier. This is like the president of, say, 10 states, right? It's the equivalent of a bunch of states. They have a couple of provinces over there. He said, as a society, we must do everything we can to protect each other. Again, it's collective risk. That's how they sell it to you. And this ban was passed on, it went into effect on August 5th. These and other measures, I'm quoting from it now, these and other measures are in place on provincial, crown, and private land until October 15th or until conditions allow them to be lifted. The fine for violating the restrictions is $25,000. $25,000 Canadian dollars for going into the woods. Now, at this point, Dell gets pretty fired up because he's a nature lover. So this, he actually got upset about this. He raised his voice and he said this thing. He said, man, this is going to go on until we are dipped in a vat of jelly just like the Matrix. And I agree with that. I agree with that. And the way he says it, he actually fucking, put some oomph into it. And we should take it to that extreme level more often, actually. Because passion is what inspires action. Good that he's getting angry. People should be getting more angry more often when it comes to speaking about these things. It's not a philosophical debate. It's about controlling every aspect of our lives. We cannot take that shit lying down. Jeffrey Jackson, then he mentions the Club of Rome and a book called The First Global Revolution, and I appreciate that reference. It reminds me of Rosa Koire, the way her work always had, she always would provide the historical like ancestry of the UN sustainability agenda, always talking about the Rio summit and that publication, Our Common Future. I mean, I've heard it so many times, it's like lasered into my brain, so good. I just want to comment on that. There's a historical basis for all of this. We need to know more of the history. We need to have more of those primary sources and not just argue it in a vacuum, right? This isn't just one story and they just banned, they're going to do their walking in the forest ban. It didn't just happen today. There's a whole history and these actions corroborating what we're saying is going on with this satanic control of the earth. That's what it is, okay? Next story. Meat eating and bioethicists. So they played this guy talking about, he's a bioethicist, so he's talking about these ticks that can infect people with a bacteria and can make people allergic to eating meat. And as a bioethicist, he, of course, points out that eating meat is immoral, or that's already established as he's talking about it. So if this is he's basically saying if this is the right thing to do, to eat less meat, and it would be better for the earth, and we don't have to kill animals, so we should think of ways to engineer those ticks to make people allergic to eating meat. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous and wrong, right? But I would caution you to check your principles on that. We should all ask ourselves, and this is a hypothetical now, if there was a pill that you could take that if you took it, it would make it impossible for you to be sexually attracted to children, which means if everyone took that pill, it would eliminate pedophilia. So it would eradicate that problem. If that was the case, everyone took it, would you force everyone to do it if you could? If that was the thing, that is the question here. And I think a lot of people would say yes. I had to think about it. I think a lot of people would say yes, force people to do it. Everyone should take it because, say, there was zero side effects, so the risk and invasion of rights is almost zero, and the benefit is valuable, like almost beyond comprehension. It's really valuable. I would say no. I wouldn't administer that pill. You can't force people to do it, no matter what. Even when the T chart is so swayed to one side, the positives and negatives, even though it would eradicate a big part of the most important problem in the world, according to me. To me personally, the biggest problem is how we treat children. Like, that's my personal fight. That's what bothers me the most. But despite that, I have to be on the side of principles there and say no. Now we're really getting into principles and moral obligations. Yeah, let me know what you would do, because I'm curious. But you can't force somebody to swallow that pill. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter if it saves the world. But now when we're talking about the practice of eating meat, first of all, factory farming is immoral. For these conditions that the animals are kept in, obviously keeping them in cages, slaughtering them, killing them, this is not an optimal way to live. I think we can all agree. These are living creatures that clearly want to live in a certain way, and there's so much downright animal torture that goes on. So if you participate on any level in that practice, then it is wrong on principle. So I just want to iron out the morality of eating meat versus veganism, because it's we're actually going to get deep into it, because I haven't talked about this in a while. I haven't mentioned it in 100 episodes on here. So here it is for full disclosure. I have eaten meat throughout my life, even the past few years, on and off, since being introduced to natural law. I still did it, and I'm moving towards getting off of it completely. But I recognize it as a destructive practice that is wrong. Carnism, in general, this is a practice that is wrong, okay? And ultimately, the government treats us like the cows and chickens, and that's the bottom line. See, that's really the bottom line for me. We should want to cut that practice off for our own sake, because we are treated like the cattle. Now, generally, but there is a way to coexist with animals. Say if you don't take the baby and you don't force the animals to do something, you could, they could live there, and you take uh, the milk, or maybe, or even the eggs, and you can consume these animal products, and it wouldn't be immoral in principle. I saw this video where there's this one, young woman, is like a college student, and yeah, this is immoral what you're doing, but, and then he says, no, clearly you've never been there, because we don't take the baby. And he basically made her look dumb, and I'd say she was kind of set up for that one, because that's the thing, she doesn't know, right? And 99% of situations, I would say, there is immoral treatment of living beings being done there, but in some cases there isn't. So I'm not an absolutist, that's all I'm saying, right? I'm not saying 100%, but in general, it is immoral what we're doing, the way we're living. It's not normal. That's the very brief overview of the moral debate on veganism versus carnism and where I stand on it. Now, Jeffrey and Dell, they get further into this article, another article called Beneficial Blood Sucking, and that's more about the ticks for meat eaters. Yeah, and this guy says, who writes this article, I didn't get his name, but he's a fucking psycho and a piece of shit, so fuck his name, right? That's how I feel about that guy. He says that it is morally obligatory to genetically engineer these ticks and to infect people, because the result would be that people would eat less meat, and that's better for the earth and better for everyone, means fewer animals would be harmed. And since people are too dumb or too weak to act according to the collective risk, that's what he says, and he includes in this climate risk, global pandemics, he groups all of that. Basically, all the fucking reasons that we are given for this new age control structure that is being built. All of those. And their main takeaway is basically this. This expert class, right? This bioethical expert class. They're basically saying we know what's best for them. We don't need their knowledge or their permission. So this is this idea that you don't need consent from the people, because this is something that is on a global level is the right or moral, the correct moral choice. So because of that, they claim that you can do it you don't need to tell them, and you can do it against their will, ultimately. That's what's being actually floated ideologically. This is what is being proposed. Very well done by Jeffrey and Dell to cover this. I would only add one thing, and again, this is the controlling parent dynamic once again. This is this academic, scientific, government, institutional class that sees themselves as parents, and all the common folk are the children. Okay, this is what the adults talk about when the kids go to sleep. And this is the thing, that this is sometimes as a parent you do this. You won't tell your children everything, because you know what the reaction is going to be, and you make the decision that this is better for them, and so you don't tell them, you lie to them. I'm not saying that's what you have to do as a parent. I'm not saying that it's the worst thing to do it. It's just that, again, this is what happens in a family, these kind of things. And this is a very controlling family that they're setting up. They're setting themselves up as the parent class. I want to emphasize that. As far as a collective moral obligation, there is no such thing as a collective moral obligation. Morality applies to individuals. So there's no such thing as the collective good. There's no such thing as a collective moral crusade. Morality applies to individuals. So if there was a collective moral obligation, it would have to apply to each of those individuals. So it would have to be moral in each individual case, not just the greatest number of them. It's not that thing with the 3 people on on one rail of the tracks and one person at this one, and if you flip the switch, you can redirect it to kill only one person as opposed to killing three. That's not how it works. Morality, if it doesn't apply to one individual out of 1 billion, then it's still immoral. Now, with that being said, I want to just tell you guys where I stand on veganism, carnism, and health, because it's not really a moral debate. The moral debate there is actually pretty one-sided. I think everybody generally recognizes that, maybe we shouldn't be killing a bunch of stuff. The question is not whether animal products are ethical to consume, it's whether or not they are physically beneficial in a dietary sense. That's the real debate here. So I want to give my dietary manifesto once and for all, because I was talking with my friend about this and I said, no, I can't do this. I just need to put it out there, and then I guess I haven't made it clear enough. So here it is. Humans can and should get their sustenance from non-animal products. That's the idea, that we don't really need to be eating meat. The higher the degree of choice and expression that a living thing has, the greater the damage done when you take that thing out of life. So, an ant is a lot different than a hamster. It's different than a horse, right? The different levels of choice and individual expression that living thing has. So you've caused, the higher that degree, the more of a crime it is to take it out of life. The less damage we do to the earth, the less damage is done to us. Okay, this is the law of correspondence, and as above, so below. Okay, this is just thermodynamics now, right? Being scientific. Now, eating meat itself is not inherently more healthy or nutritious. The nutritional value in animal products is a result of that animal correctly assimilating the resources of the earth within themselves. And that's the reason why you can live off animal products, is because they know what to eat. It's already been processed. It's already structured the way it should be. So if you eat what they had, you're taking on that life force. But the life force itself is not coming from like a muscle, a bicep. It's coming from the sun. It's coming from all the nutrients. Now that is why there are plenty of people who have tried all sorts of things, and they've tried to go vegan and it didn't work for them, and they observed themselves to operate better, to be healthier while consuming animal products. That's part of that. That partly accounts for that observation, because that is the experience of a lot of people. And look, and I'm pro-vegan, right? But I think we should point out that it doesn't, in the present state of the world, it doesn't always work for everybody. And I think, again, we have to ask ourselves why. And that's part of it. That's part of why. The bigger issue is the food of the earth has been fucking poisoned. That's the real issue here. Instead of getting mad at each other and the vegans getting mad at the meat eaters and getting mad at the vegans, how about we get angry at the people fucking poisoning this earth altogether? The nutritional, it's much easier to poison a plant than an animal, because it's more directly, it's simpler to do it. The animal was a living being, so even if it ate the same poison sprayed with pesticides vegetable, it's not as toxic to eat it. But if you eat just the vegetables, then you're getting a high concentration of freaking pesticides that have been undiluted. And the global control structure poisons the hierarchy of life, starting with the first level, the minerals and vegetables. And that's what I think is fucking happening with all the fucking spraying in the air to freaking poison the fucking food supply. I mean, sprayed like rats, sprayed like freaking rodents. That's what's going on. So this needs to be part of the vegan carnist debate, instead of arguing about fucking bullshit. It's not that it's bullshit, but we need to really point the gun where it's got to be pointed on that one. So They spray the freaking the most nutritious food, what we need to be eating the most. They spray it. Now you can still eat animal meat, obviously, because so let's get into it now. So when people say, I understand the morality of it, you're right in the moral sense, but then why does the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, why do they encourage veganism so much? Why is there so much pro-vegan stuff coming from the same people that want to poison the earth? Like, why are they doing that? Well, so it would indicate that the control system does not want people to eat meat, right? And I would say partially correct, but partially they do want you eating meat. That's the thing. So the fruits and vegetables of the earth are sprayed and soaked with pesticides or genetically engineered. So it fits the agenda there, right? But just like the EU flavor of censorship is different than the technocratic US version of censorship, carnism fits the agenda too. It's another false duality societally. It works for the rest of society. Not everyone's going to go vegan. But so they're going to tell you that they want you to go vegan, but they know not everybody is going to do it, and they're actually perfectly okay with people eating meat. They want people eating meat because that is how we're treated. They want us to be okay with sacrifice and bloodshed and these old practices of caging living beings, taking from them, controlling them, okay? Again, this is the controlling parent again. And it's that old false adage that one must die for another to live. The zero-sum game bullshit where there's a cycle of a predator and prey, and just this constantly kill or be killed, eat or be eaten. That is the way of the world, and both the carnists and vegans are being they're being led to the slaughter. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying we are so powerless in the grand scheme of what we eat and how the food gets to us that we really need to step the action way the fuck up so intensely to get to the bottom of what is being done to the planet by these control types, because we don't actually know. We don't actually know because these are military level operations. We don't know what's going on with the soil, the food, and why the freaking mushrooms are not growing, and why, who knows, next year there could be entire crops that don't grow, and people don't know why it's happening. And these people hold the keys, okay? They hold the keys. Don't worry about what's on my plate today. Worry about who's giving out the rations. Worry about who's bottlenecking the rations. That's what we need to do. So I'm calling for unity on this. And yeah, we could talk about right or wrong, but at the end of the day, we need to take action. Otherwise, it's just fucking bullshit talking for no purpose at all. So there's that. And actually, there's a short little story at the end. Dell talks about this hydrocarbon butter, a butter that's not. I can't believe it's not butter. Basically, it has no animal products. It's completely not including animal fats. Now, when he said hydrocarbon, immediately I see the number 1 and the number 6, the periodic table. Hydrogen and carbon are the two most ubiquitous elements in the universe. Hydrogen is basically the basis of all life. It's the original single proton. Hydrogen is the original element. It's the building block of everything. Now, carbon is the element that is most abundant, basically, in the earth. Everything we do is based on carbon. Like, carbon is basically the meat of the earth is carbon, so to speak. Everything we do is based on carbon. All life forms have it, and it's actually the mother and the father, and that's why I mentioned it, because it's the 1 and the 6. Hydro, of course, the hydrogen. This is water, right? Of course, I know it's water and oxygen. It's actually interesting that oxygen is the 8th element, and I would say it has similar qualities. Hydrogen and oxygen, they go together. I would say, of course, number 8 is similar to the number 1 because it's the next octave. But that's for the future. That's my personal research on that. That is yet to come. But carbon is very clearly like the masculine element. It's the father. It's 6 is the limiter. 6 is Saturn. This is Father Time, Chronos. I actually think it's very interesting that carbon and carnism, everything that I mentioned, meat, right? Carbon, carne. I don't think they're actually etymologically directly related, but clearly they are. It's the same root. Things that are fleshly, things that are, of the earth. That's carnal. So you've got hydrogen, the ubiquitous, the fundamental, and then you've got carbon, the abundant, for human life, especially for animal life, basically, right? And he talks about, that actually mentions, first they had this petroleum sunscreen to rub all over you, and now we're getting these skin cancers, right? And petroleum is actually a hydrocarbon as well. Like that's the whole petrochemical industry. Petroleum jelly, I mean, it's just these are hydrocarbons. Again, it's the same thing, but I don't even think he knew what connection he was drawing then, but there's actually a direct connection right there as well. And we are in this hydrocarbon paradigm that is, of course, what our energy, that is what we run our society on, all of our engines, right? Where our electricity usage and all of this comes from. It's all carbon, hydrocarbons, and this is the old way of the world, very animalistic, very basic. And 6 is the number of the beast, right? Well, that's, again, carbon, 6. Control over the worldly. That's what they're all about. Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out because I like that symbolic significance there. Now, Del ends this show with an Alex Jones style rant. He really just, and I actually recognize the cadence. I'm like, oh, this is totally Alex. I'm like, he's pushing it a little bit, right? It was a little bit ridiculous. And now let me get into big channels and the problem with them. Now, I was introduced to the conspiracy reality of the world through Alex Jones around 2008, 2007. Then in 2019, Alex Jones was actually the gateway to me coming across the philosophical and spiritual reality of natural law because he had Mark Passio on as a guest, and that's when I was introduced to Mark. So, of course, I'm grateful to Alex, personally. If not for that, who knows how my entire life would have worked out, because it wasn't until then, and I was really soaking into the hardcore historical, philosophical, and downright mathematical information with the passion and the anger that Passio did it with. That's what really changed things around for me. It wasn't until then that I really started to pursue that desire to be someone great. It's been a dormant desire throughout my life to be somebody, to be someone who matters in history, someone who's tough, someone who fights the enemy of freedom, to be someone that I could be proud of. I've always wanted that. And it wasn't until I heard Mark Passio break things down, and this was during the pandemic, and that really was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's when my life changed. Since then, my entire life changed. Now, what if I heard Mark Passio a week later than I did? Well, in October of 2020, I totaled 2 cars in 2 weeks. So I was living in a way where a week was a long time. A lot could happen in a week. It was an eternity. I could have died or went to jail, or even if I just started my YouTube later. You could trace that domino effect and ask if Soundpath would even be called Soundpath right now, or whether the amazing music festival would even be happening, right? There's a domino effect to these things. And I say all that to emphasize my gratitude for these individuals and their work. Not just Mark Passio, but also Alex Jones and Del Bigtree. Okay, so I'm not complaining about who they are. I really do appreciate them, and I acknowledge their efforts and their talents to get that big audience and to actually have power to make a difference in the world. Power that I just don't have. I can come on here and say something, it's not going to have that big of an impact, but they have the impact, and I respect that. But, and this is something I have not said publicly before, right? That's why I'm kind of easing into it. Beneath the surface, my intolerance for partial knowledge, partial and incomplete understanding of the world has been increasing. These are lukewarm truth tellers. That's what the High Wire is, and that's what the Alex Jones show has been. There have to be higher standards for them, and they are in the same category as What on Earth is Happening by Mark Passio, and also this show, This Week in Tyranny. We are the aggregators, the amplifiers, and the broadcasters. We're not the actual researchers that bring the stories out there. We find them and then we integrate it, right? Where the actual whistleblowing, the research, the scientific discovery is done, those people don't have to have full understanding of the world. They can just do their thing. We need specialists. But it's up to us. It's up to the people who talk about the entire world, what's happening, the ones who do the news and talk to people. It's up to them to put that research into the correct perspective. But Alex Jones talks about politics to this day, still. And Del Bigtree questions nothing about authority and government as a whole. He somehow sees all the medical tyranny, the sustainable development agenda, all the censorship, as somehow coming from the Democrat side only. And the idea that Trump and RFK are fighting against it. People in the natural law community even think that. So, look, and that's not me holding Del by his old statements. He said that in this show. So that's what he thinks now. So think about the millions of viewers now that watch this channel. Millions that come across that crucial, valuable information we just went over. But the man who's presenting it, he's supposed to be the master, right? Master not as in a master, but a teacher who fully embodies his teachings. He lives it. That man is someone who's fully caught in the most basic of illusions with politics, with guys like that, guys like Del, guys like Alex. Look, me as an underground, up-and-coming channel, I am very sensitive to the crabs in a barrel mentality. The last thing I want to do is come on here and tear down other people that do what I do. First of all, because it's weak to do so. I think it's weak to do it, and I would absolutely hate to ever be led by jealousy and envy and resentment. This is not coming from jealousy and envy and resentment, and I've put it off for a long time to not come across the wrong way. But it's gone too far. So I'm going to say, beyond even that, my personal success is linked to Del's success and the success of the world, because ultimately we are on the same side. We want the same things. His heart is in the right place, sure. I'm just talking about his fucking dumb mind to not see these things by now. And despite all of that, I have to express what I truly think about these big channels and the people running them. You bring the information to millions of people, and what is the result? I'll tell you what the result is. A bunch of people out there, all four corners of the world, loosely connected by a surface understanding of certain information, a little bit, and just enough information to set you apart from the mainstream, but not enough to take it anywhere. Because to take knowledge somewhere, you need to have a cohesive worldview that you can articulate. You need to be able to say it from scratch, not to send them a link. So when you try to talk to people in the real world, it doesn't end up being like Del's show. It's not where everything goes well with no resistance. In the real world, you get pushback. So you need to know how that happens, how to deal with that pushback. So here's the example if it happens to me, right? Say, concerning vaccines. Well, first of all, I would say my worldview rests fully on objective principles, just like science. I'm a science guy. And the complexity of life in present day clearly indicates intelligent design. Things are how they are for a reason. I'm not a believer or atheist. I take life for what it is, and there's a clear reality and proof at every corner of intelligent design, okay, and a fractal nature of the universe. So when it comes to health, it's an interconnecting system of biology and chemistry, yes, but also emotion, psychology, and action, decision making. Now, the principles of health, they're basically having a variety of stimuli, right? Having a healthy environment and fluid motion. Not having blockages, not having, just fluid motion. And injecting a foreign substance into your body in order to prevent an illness, that's contrary to health on all those levels. It's not a health thing. Furthermore, This really isn't a scientific debate anyway when we're talking about vaccines, because the answer is so obvious, yet you and I are worlds apart when it comes to that. And an entire scientific and medical community is on your side of the argument and against me. How is that possible? It can only be possible if there's religion involved. So therefore, the real debate is about mainstream institutions and whether or not societal institutions are actually doing the opposite for humanity that they claim to do, which makes this a debate about the history of societal systems, namely religion, because only in a religion or cult can two people look at the same source material, the same book, and reach opposite conclusions. And that's what the pro-vaccine movement is. And I'll prove it to you. And that's what I would say. Now, I wrote that, right? Obviously, I didn't just make that up now. I wrote that and read it off the screen. Obviously, it wouldn't go that perfectly in person for me, but pretty close. And that's because I've practiced. I've practiced this. I think in my head all the time. I have conversations in my head all the time. And I sharpen my thoughts like a boxer who throws the same punch a million times and then adjusts that to be true. You know, true in the real world, effective. That's what the word, I made up an acronym for true. Tested to result in universal effectiveness, or tested results of unified effectiveness. That's what truth is. It's something that checks out every single time, that you can test. Truth is not dogma that is put into effect. It's, you can test it and it's always going to be there. That's what truth is. But you get a bunch of people who know some of these things about vaccines, and they can probably repeat some of them. Then they hit a wall in the real world, because nowhere in the people that they listen to, that people listen to, their podcasts, their researchers, nowhere do they have a person who is militant about life, militant about freedom, you know, like actually fucking for real action. But there are plenty of people who feel like they are on the right side of history just because they know things. So this respect for the lukewarm researchers has come to an end for me. And I honestly think it should come to an end for the natural law community. We should not be okay with people just because they do. And I'm talking about specifically the ones, the big channels who do exactly this, who are supposed to, claim to, put things into perspective and give you that perspective, okay? Maybe, if there was no Del Bigtree, maybe people would have found William Cooper first, or John Rappaport way earlier. And if they did find them earlier, maybe they would have gotten to a deeper level of knowledge on a broad spectrum of topics, not just one topic. And then instead of having 10 million people who can post memes and send links, maybe we would have 10,000 people who have at least a unified worldview, and most of all, are unified in their level of action. People who are interconnected and communicating with each other, like a family or a fucking army, right? We could use that. See, it all goes back to the family. That's what a family truly is. It's a unit that's so intimately connected that they are going to move as a hornet's nest, like a hornet's nest, to defend each other. They will be ferocious, but they don't need generals or give orders. You don't need a leader in the family. They could it could swing around. They're united. They move as individuals according to the principle of love. It's just based on love, and that's all it takes. See, this global family that they're trying to sell us is false, but the principle of family is very true, and it starts within us, because there's a family within us. Again, you could take this down to the cellular level: the proton, electron, and neutron. There's a trinity on every level, and we have a family within us. We have the masculine, feminine, and you have the child within us. And it is all about family. And I can wholeheartedly and shamelessly say that a family and an army just like that is going to get together next weekend in Pennsylvania. It's called Soundpath, the Soundpath to Freedom Festival. I'll be performing live. I'm not going to rant. I'm not going to rant and talk shit about people. I'm not even angry, that's the thing, but passion matters. So I express my passion mostly through my music recently, and it's good to let it come out because at the end of the day, that's how you guys can verify for yourselves if something is real, because you have to make that judgment for yourself. At Soundpath, we're going to have a bunch of musicians. We're going to have amazing people, people that I'm excited to meet in person. Um, and this is the last This Week in Tyranny, I think, before I go out there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week on This Week in Tyranny from the road, because I will do it from Pennsylvania, of course. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.